with the step, and he's fouled.
Bird and put him in a headlock. Julius and Bird were in a fight. Malone came up from behind.
The National Basketball Association has a long storied history filled with famous players, teams, and of course, rivalries. That's why we're breaking down the 10 biggest NBA feuds ever. Number 10, New York Knicks versus Baltimore Bullets. By the time the two teams met in the 1969 NBA playoffs, it was clear that these two teams were on their way to becoming major NBA powers. The Knicks would win the first playoff series by a 4-0 margin, and they would also win in 1970, but this time it was a much closer 4-3 series, with the Knicks surviving a tough 7th game at Madison Square Garden. They would go on to win their first NBA title over the Los Angeles Lakers. The Bullets turned things around in 1971, taking the series in 7 brutal games. The home team won the first 6 games, but Baltimore ended that by winning the 7th game in New York. The Bullets made it to the NBA Finals, but they were swept by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and the Milwaukee Bucks that year. But in 1972, Monroe ended up getting traded to the Knicks, and he and Frazier formed a great 1-2 punch. The Knicks and Bullets would meet in 3 more playoff series from 72 to 74, and the Knicks would win all of them. New York and Baltimore became a spring NBA rite of passage, and it became must-see theater for all NBA fans. Number 9, Boston Celtics versus Philadelphia 76ers. The rivalry between the Boston Celtics and the Philadelphia 76ers got started with the Syracuse Nationals of upstate New York in 1964 and moved to Philadelphia and became the 76ers. The rivalry got started with a bang in the 1965 playoffs when the two teams met in the Eastern Conference Finals. The two teams battled for 7 games, and the Celtics had a 110-109 lead in the 7th game, but turned the ball over in the final seconds. However, when the Sixers tried to inbound the ball for a winning shot, John Havlicek deflected the ball to teammate Sam Jones, and the Celtics held on for the victory. They would go on to win the NBA title. That series would always be remembered as the one where Havlicek stole the ball. The rivalry would go on to hiatus until 1977, when the two teams would rekindle their hostilities. They would meet 5 times in 9 years, and this time the 76ers would win 3 of the 5 matchups. Number 8, Michael Jordan versus Isaiah Thomas. Chicagoan Isaiah Thomas was the leader of the Detroit Pistons, and he had little use for Chicago Bulls rookie Michael Jordan. Jordan was at the beginning of a career that would see him become perhaps the greatest NBA player of all time, and his overwhelming ability was obvious during his rookie season. When he went to the All-Star game in 1985 as a rookie, he wanted to put his basketball skills on display. Thomas was not interested in helping Jordan enhance his reputation, and he engineered a plan to freeze Jordan out of the All-Star game. Jordan's opportunities in the game were limited. Eventually, word of Thomas's conspiracy got out, and it lit a fuse in a bitter rivalry with Thomas that would never abate, even after their careers ended. Jordan got his revenge when Thomas was kept off on the 1992 US Olympic Dream Team. Thomas was a sensational guard and a Hall of Famer, but his career would never compare to Jordan's. The rivalry would manifest itself every time the Pistons and Bulls would meet, and it would become especially intense in the playoffs. In many cases, personal rivalries eventually gave way to great friendships, but not in the case of Thomas and Jordan. Number 7, Detroit Pistons versus Chicago Bulls. The Detroit Pistons and the Chicago Bulls had a rivalry for Eastern Conference superiority in the late 1980s and early 1990s. In the early years of the rivalry, the Bad Boys from Detroit had their way with the imposition of the Jordan rules. Those rules were Detroit's philosophy designed by head coach Chuck Daly to make the other Bulls besides Michael Jordan take the most important shots of the game. Jordan, of course, was simply too explosive and dangerous. The Pistons tried to put a body on him and foul him every chance they got. The game plan worked, as the Pistons beat the Bulls in 5 games in 1988 and in 6 games in '89. In 1990, the Bulls pushed the Pistons to 7 games, but Detroit still came out on top. However, the Bulls finally got the upper hand in 1991. Not only did they beat the Pistons, they swept them in 4 games. Moments before the 4th game ended, Thomas and several of his teammates walked off the court and refused to shake hands and congratulate the Bulls. Chicago would go on to win their first championship by beating the Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA Finals. Number 6, Larry Bird versus Julius Erving. When Bird joined the Celtics following his stellar college career at Indiana State in 1979, he immediately brought respectability back to the franchise. Erving joined the 76ers after the NBA and ABA merged prior to the 1976 to 1977 season, and he brought an amazing set of skills to the 76ers which helped them rise in the East as well. Bird and Dr. J crossed paths many times, and while there was anger and passion in their rivalry, there was also a deep mutual respect. Their battles were a virtual stalemate. Stylistically, Bird was a clever passer and a brilliant outside shooter, while Erving played above the rim and dominated with his creativity. Nevertheless, both men were near equals who enjoyed brilliant careers. Number 5. Phil Jackson versus Pat Riley. Riley became head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers in 1981 and led the team to 4 NBA titles. He later earned one more title with the Miami Heat in 2006. Jackson won 6 NBA titles as head coach of the Chicago Bulls, and then won 5 more as leader of the Lakers. His 11 championships as head coach allowed him to surpass Red Auerbach, who won 9 titles as head coach of the Boston Celtics for most titles as a head coach. While Riley and Jackson have been 2 of the league's leading figures for years, and Jackson talks about respect he has for Riley above, each man has spurred the other in an effort to gain an edge. Number 4. Chicago Bulls versus New York Knicks. The Chicago Bulls had many rivalries during the Michael Jordan era, and they regularly punished opponents who got in their way as they climbed the playoff ladder. The New York Knicks were one of those teams. The Bulls and the Knicks met 6 times in the postseason between 1989 and 1995, and the Bulls were victorious in 5 of those seasons. The Knicks' only victory in the season came in the 1994 playoffs, one of the 2 seasons that Jordan left the Bulls in an attempt to play baseball. Jordan often was at his best in Madison Square Garden, and he scored 55 points in a 1995 game shortly after coming back from his baseball sojourn. Number 3. Bill Russell versus Wilt Chamberlain. Bill Russell is the greatest winner in NBA history, having led the Boston Celtics to 11 championships during a playing career that lasted from 1956 through 1969. Wilt Chamberlain was the game's most prolific scorer and a dominating physical specimen who could overpower nearly anyone who attempted to compete with him. His teams won 2 championships in a career that lasted from 1959 through 1973. Despite the perception that the 2 men didn't like each other, nothing could have been farther from the truth. Russell and Chamberlain were the best of friends off the court, and the mutual respect between the two was just important to the 2 stars as their legendary battles on the floor. Number 2. Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird. Unlike the Bill Russell-Wilt Chamberlain rivalry, Magic Johnson and Larry Bird were not friends, at least not at the beginning of the rivalry. While the gregarious Johnson from Michigan State had nothing against Bird, the Indiana State star rarely trusted anyone from outside his inner circle, and Johnson certainly did not qualify. Their first epic confrontation came in the 1979 NCAA championship game, and Johnson's Spartans got the best of Bird's overmatched Sycamores. During their long and heated rivalry, the 2 men became close friends in 1985, as they got to know each other while filming a sneaker commercial. They never backed down from each other on the court, and each man's spectacular legacy is intertwined with the other. Number 1. Boston Celtics versus Los Angeles Lakers. The Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers have met in the NBA Finals 12 times, and many of the battles have been classics. No 2 teams have ever met more often to decide their league championship in any professional sport. In addition to Bill Russell and Larry Bird, the Celtics have featured stars like John Havlicek, Sam Jones, Bob Cousy, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, and Paul Pierce. Wilt Chamberlain and Magic Johnson have been joined by brilliant names like Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, James Worthy, Brian Scott, and Kobe Bryant. The Celtics won the first 8 times the 2 teams met for the title, but the Lakers had won 3 of the last 4 championship matchups. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any new videos. This has been our breakdown of the 10 biggest NBA feuds ever.